Rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking everything in sight. Malcolm wiped his hands on his already wet jeans, exhausted from a long day at the shop. He was about to lock up when he spotted a car on the side of the road. The hood was up, steam rising, and standing beside it was a woman, drenched and frustrated. She glanced at him, hesitant. Most people would have just kept walking. But Malcolm, he didn't even think twice. Need some help? She nodded slowly, watching as he grabbed his toolbox and got to work. He had no idea that this moment would change his life forever. Before we continue, let us know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Malcolm had been fixing cars for as long as he could remember. It wasn't just a job to him, it was a way of life. His father had owned a small garage, and even though it wasn't much, it was honest work. Malcolm had learned early on that a man's reputation was everything, and he built his own by being fair, hard-working, and always willing to lend a hand. But lately, things had been tough. Business was slow, bills were piling up, and he was barely scraping by. Still, he never let that stop him from helping someone in need. That's why, when he saw the woman standing helplessly in the rain, he didn't hesitate. Her name was Ava. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, now completely soaked. She looked like she didn't belong in a place like this. A luxury car, expensive heels, the kind of person who usually wouldn't step foot in a local repair shop. But in that moment, she was just someone who needed help. She hesitated when Malcolm approached, eyeing him carefully. In the world she lived in, not everyone who offered to help had good intentions, but there was something about him. His calm confidence, the way he got to work without asking for anything that made her trust him. She didn't know it yet, but she had just met someone who was about to change both of their lives. Malcolm worked quickly, ignoring the rain soaking through his jacket. He had seen plenty of stalled cars before, but this one was different. The engine was in bad shape, and fixing it wouldn't be easy. Ava stood nearby, watching him work. She seemed nervous. She wasn't sure if she should trust him. But Malcolm didn't ask for money, didn't complain about the rain. He just got to work. After a few minutes, he straightened up. "Your battery's done for, and the alternator's barely hanging on," he said. "You'll need a tow, but I can get it started for now so you don't have to wait out here in the rain." Ava looked at him, surprised. "You're just helping me? You don't even know me." Malcolm wiped his hands on a rag and shrugged. "You needed help. That's enough." Ava nodded slowly. Most people would have asked for something in return, maybe demanded cash before even touching the car. But Malcolm wasn't like that. A few minutes later, the engine roared to life. Ava let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Malcolm smiled. "That should get you home, but don't wait too long to get it fixed." Ava reached into her purse, pulling out a wad of cash. "Please, let me pay you for this." Malcolm shook his head. "Nah, I didn't do it for that." Ava hesitated. She wasn't used to this. Someone helping her without expecting something in return. She handed him her business card instead. "At least take this. If you ever need anything, call me." Malcolm chuckled, taking the card and slipping it into his pocket. "Sure thing." Ava smiled. "You don't even know who I am, do you?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" Ava just laughed. "Maybe." She got into her car, waved, and drove off. Malcolm watched her go, shaking his head. Rich people were strange. He thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, he found out he was wrong. That morning, Malcolm was working under the hood of an old truck when he heard a loud rumbling sound outside. It wasn't a car. It wasn't thunder. It was a helicopter. He wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped outside, then froze. A helicopter was landing right in front of his house. The entire neighborhood had gathered, staring in shock. Kids pointed, People whispered, and Malcolm, he just stood there, heart pounding, as Ava stepped out. But this time, she wasn't just some woman with car trouble. She was surrounded by men in suits, and the way everyone moved around her, it was clear she was important. Ava smiled. "Told you maybe you should know who I am." Malcolm crossed his arms, still trying to process what was happening. "All right, I'll bite. Who are you?" She handed him an envelope. "Open it." Malcolm's fingers felt stiff as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the paper, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside was a job offer. Not just any job. A lead mechanic position at her luxury auto company. The salary, more money than Malcolm had ever seen in his life. He looked up at her, completely stunned. "You serious?" Ava nodded. "You helped me when you didn't have to. Now, I'm returning the favor." Malcolm shook his head, still in disbelief. "I don't know what to say." Ava smiled. "Say yes." Malcolm stared at the paper in his hands. For the first time in a long time, his life was about to change. Malcolm stood there, staring at the paper in his hands. He read the words over and over, but they didn't feel real. A lead mechanic position. A salary that could change his life. Benefits he'd only heard about in passing conversations. It was more than a job offer. It was a lifeline. He looked up at Ava, still in shock. "Why are you doing this?" Ava smiled, but there was something serious in her eyes. "Because you deserve it. People like you don't always get noticed, but they should." Malcolm let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "All I did was help you fix your car." "It wasn't just that," Ava replied. "You didn't have to help me. You could have kept walking. You didn't ask for anything in return. That says more about your character than any job application ever could." Malcolm's mind was spinning. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. His whole life, he had been the guy in the background, fixing cars, keeping his head down, never asking for much. And now, out of nowhere, this woman shows up in a helicopter, offering him a job most people would kill for. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I'm just a small-town mechanic. I don't think I'm cut out for some fancy corporate job." Ava stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Don't sell yourself short. You're more than just a mechanic. You're honest, hard-working, and you do the right thing even when no one's watching. That's exactly the kind of person I need on my team." Malcolm looked at the crowd of neighbors gathered around. They were all watching, whispering, waiting to see what he would do. He felt the weight of their eyes on him. But more than that, he felt the weight of his own doubts. "What if I'm not good enough?" he asked, almost to himself. Ava didn't hesitate. "You are. Trust me." He thought about his late father, who had taught him everything he knew about fixing cars. His father had always said, "Work hard and one day it'll pay off." Malcolm had believed those words even when things were tough. But until now, he had never seen that payoff. He took a deep breath. "I don't want to leave my shop. It's been my life for years." Ava nodded. "I get that. But think about what this could mean for you, for your family. You don't have to forget where you came from, but you don't have to stay there forever either." Malcolm's hands trembled slightly as he held the offer letter. He thought about the bills piling up on his kitchen counter, the nights he spent worrying about whether he'd be able to make rent, the times he had to tell his little sister he couldn't afford to buy her the things she wanted. This wasn't just a job. It was a way out, but it was also terrifying. "What if I fail?" he asked. Ava smiled. "Then you get back up and try again. But something tells me you won't." The crowd was still watching. Malcolm could hear snippets of their conversations. "Is he really going to turn that down? Man, I'd take that job in a heartbeat. Come on, Malcolm, you deserve this." He closed his eyes for a moment, blocking out the noise. He thought about the night he helped Ava, standing in the rain, tired and soaked, but still willing to help a stranger. He hadn't done it for recognition or reward. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. And now, that simple act of kindness was giving him a chance to change his life. He opened his eyes and looked at Ava. "I'll do it." Ava's face lit up. "You won't regret it." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Malcolm barely heard them. His mind was racing, a mix of excitement and fear. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it was something worth looking forward to. Malcolm lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, still trying to process everything. His whole life had been about working hard and making ends meet, not about big opportunities or life-changing offers. He had never imagined something like this happening to him. The thought of leaving his shop felt strange. It wasn't much, but it was his. It was where he had spent years fixing cars, where his father had taught him everything he knew. But deep down, he knew Ava was right. This was bigger than just a job. The next morning, Malcolm walked through his garage, running his hands over the worn-out tools, the workbench covered in oil stains, and the rusted sign that hung outside. This place had been his world. But now, he had a chance to build something new. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Ava. "We're ready when you are." He took a deep breath and replied, "I'm in." A few hours later, Malcolm found himself standing in front of a massive glass building, the headquarters of Ava's company. Everything about it screamed success. Walking through those doors felt surreal. He wasn't just a small-town mechanic anymore. Inside, Ava was waiting for him, smiling. "Glad you made it." Malcolm nodded, still adjusting to everything. "Me too." She handed him a folder. "Before we get started, I want you to know something." He opened it and froze. Inside were blueprints. Not just any blueprints, these were for a new auto repair training program. His name was on the cover. Malcolm's eyes widened. "What is this?" Ava leaned against the desk. "You're not just working for me. You're helping me build something." Malcolm's heart pounded. "You want me to?" She nodded. "You have the skills, the work ethic, and most importantly, the heart. I don't just want you fixing cars. I want you training the next generation of mechanics, people like you who never got the opportunities they deserved." For the first time since this all started, Malcolm felt speechless. This wasn't just a job. This was a chance to change lives. He closed the folder and looked up at Ava. "I don't know what to say." Ava smiled. "Then don't say anything. Just get to work." Malcolm let out a slow breath. This wasn't what he had expected when he stopped to help a stranger in the rain, but maybe it was exactly what he was meant for. Malcolm sat in his new office, still adjusting to the unbelievable shift in his life. A week ago, he had been just another mechanic trying to make ends meet. Now, he was leading a program designed to give opportunities to people just like him. He glanced down at the blueprints again. His name was on them. His name. It was still hard to believe. Ava walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "How's it feel?" Malcolm chuckled. "I woke up in someone else's life." She handed him a cup. "You earned this, Malcolm. You think this just happened by chance? It happened because of who you are." Malcolm took a sip of coffee, staring out the office window. "I keep thinking about my dad. He always told me that hard work pays off, but I never really believed it until now." Ava nodded. "Same here. My father was a mechanic too. That's why this matters to me. I know how many talented people out there never get a shot." Malcolm thought about all the young guys in his neighborhood who had skills but no opportunities, about the people who had been overlooked just like he had been. This wasn't just a new job. This was a chance to change lives. For the first time, he saw the bigger picture. Back in his hometown, things were different too. People had heard the story. The guy who helped a stranger in the rain, only to have a helicopter land in front of his house days later. the small-town mechanic who went from fixing cars in a run-down garage to working for a major automotive company. His old shop wasn't empty, though. His best friend had stepped up to run it, keeping it open for the community. Malcolm had made sure of that. Because no matter how much his life changed, he would never forget where he came from. Sometimes life rewards you when you least expect it. Malcolm never asked for anything in return when he stopped to help Ava. He didn't do it because he wanted something. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And in the end, that kindness came back to him in ways he could have never imagined. Malcolm's life had changed in ways he never saw coming. One moment, he was a regular mechanic helping a stranger in the rain. The next, he was standing inside a corporate office, leading a program that would change lives. But what really mattered? He never lost who he was. He didn't forget the struggles, the long nights at his old shop, the feeling of wondering if all his hard work would ever pay off. And now, he was proof that it does, because kindness always comes back. Now let's talk about it. Have you ever done something kind without expecting anything in return? Or have you ever been in a situation where someone's kindness changed your life? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation. And if this story made you think, hit, share, and subscribe, because these are the stories that remind us good things happen when you least expect them. Kindness matters, and sometimes it can change everything.